Uh, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be at MPAC and to meet its wonderful, brilliant team again. And it's an honor to be on the same panel with Madhur Agapia and Peter Beinart, both of which are, I think, brave defenders of human dignity and human rights in this very dark moment of, I think, history. Now, I want to bring a little bit of a historical perspective to this discussion and share a few anecdotes or facts that I covered in my book published last year, The Islamic Moses, How the Prophet Inspired Jews and Muslims to Flourish Together. In 1748, Rabbi Abraham Gershon from Quito, Poland, a Hasidic rabbi, migrated to Hebron. And in a letter that he sent back home to his brother, he expressed his astonishment with the state of Jewish life he found in the Holy Land. He wrote, "In this holy city, there's a Jewish courtyard which Jews are permitted to close during the Sabbath and festival. No one can come in or out all night, and they virtually have no fear of Gentiles. And it's not only this, but the local Gentiles, even the greatest ones, love the Jews very much. When there's a celebration, such as circumcision, their leaders come to celebrate with Jews and dance with the Jews." Now, I learned about this letter from an article by Prof. Yitzhak Melamed of Johns Hopkins University, published in Torah.com, and the title is Hasidic-Muslim Relations in Ottoman Palestine. Here, Dr. Melamed, after translating the letter from Hebrew, he says, "The tone of the letter makes it clear that Rabbi Gershon could hardly believe the reality that transpired before his eyes. Having spent most of his life in Eastern Europe, he was not accustomed to see Gentiles who dance with the Jews in their celebration and treat them as beloved neighbors." Now, of course, no single letter or document fully explains a historical era, but I think there is some historical truth indeed captured by this document and many other documents from the era, where rabbis who came to the Ottoman Empire and telling, like the Rabbi Yitzhak Sarfati in the 1400s, saying his co-religionists in Germany, "Why are you still staying in that accursed land? Come to this land here, the Ottoman Empire, where we have freedom and to worship our religion, to worship according to our religion." There's some truth, and that truth is, until the dark century, which is the 20th century, this land was a place where Jews, Christians, and Muslims could coexist and could see each other as good neighbors rather than sworn enemies. Now, how did that lost pluralism happen? We got almost insight into it. I mean, Peter explained how Judaism emerged as a monotheistic Abrahamic faith with a sense of human dignity in human history. It was a huge change in that sense, theological scene, but it was just confined to the Jewish people. Then two outbursts of that Abrahamic monotheism happened in world history. One was Christianity, the earlier one, thanks to a rabbi from Nazareth, Jesus of Nazareth, and his disciples. And the second one was Islam. And with all due respect, Islam even stayed more loyal to some of the core foundations of Judaism because it carried out the same theology, didn't get into the more Trinitarian theology, and it also kept the importance of law, different from the direction Christianity take with the perspective of Paul. That's why the halakha and the sharia are very similar and important concepts in Islam, and I think they should be discussed in tandem today, not just in exclusion. But anyway, so Islam emerged as this third big manifestation of Abrahamic monotheism. And one thing that's interesting about Islam is that it started as a anti-idolatrous as a monotheist campaign in 7th century Arabia, but always considered Jews and Christians as fellow monotheists. The Quran brought certain criticisms toward Jews and Christians, and some people too much focus on that. But also the Quran said they are fellow monotheists. They're the people of the book. They follow the Torah and the gospel, which is highly respected, venerated in the Quran. The Quran presents itself as the third testament, if you will, after these two, the first and the Old and the New Testaments, using a Christian terminology there. And that is also why Islamic law from the very beginning accepted the rights of Jews and Christians to practice their religion under Muslim rule. That's why when Islam quickly became an empire right after the time of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, stretching from Spain to India, Muslims conquered places. And I think, I'm not glorifying conquest today. It was an age of empires that happened. I don't think we have to bring that mentality today. But in this huge empire they created, they allowed Jews and Christians to keep their places of worship and their religious traditions. It wasn't equal citizenship that we enjoy in the modern world today, so it cannot be idealized. But for its time, actually, it was a quite tolerant model. That's why when Jews were persecuted in Christendom, as it was called at the time, Europe, forced to convert to Christianity, they repeatedly migrated to the lens of Islam. It happened in Ashkenazi communities first, and then the major Sephardic migration to the Ottoman Empire. It was a blessing for them to come to Ottoman lands. And Islam's pluralism also, Islam's pluralism was also evident in Jerusalem, the holy city we're discussing today. Just a few years after the Prophet, Muslims conquered Jerusalem under the time of Caliph Umar. Bloodless conquest. I mean, there was a siege, but after that, Jerusalem surrendered. And Christians were worried that these Arabs would come and slaughter them all, and it was this new religion. But instead, Caliph Umar came and, respectfully met the patriarch. The patriarch was surprised that he was, not dressed so well compared to himself. But he said, we'll keep your religion. Don't worry. I mean, he visited the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and said, you're going to keep your church. We're not going to touch it. Actually, the patriarch invited him to pray in the church according to one tradition written in Islamic sources. And he said, if I do here, Muslims then can maybe convert it into a mosque. So he prayed outside, and that place became the small Caliph of Umar, which is still there in the old city in Jerusalem. And then he wanted to see the Temple Mount. And Christians said, it's a dumpster. What do you want to do there? Jews were kicked out centuries ago, and Christians were using it as a place to throw trash. And Caliph Umar, with a convert to Judaism, Ka'b al-Ahbar, and went there to see that. He was surprised that this Temple of Solomon was in such bad shape. With his own hands, he started to clean the place, and Muslims leveled and cleaned the Temple Mount. And a few decades later, Muslims built the Dome of the Rock, the Qubbat al-Sahra, and it became the Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, what is interesting is that Jews at the time welcomed this Islamic conquest of Jerusalem for a few reasons. First of all, before this Islamic conquest, Jews were not welcome in Jerusalem. Actually, they were expelled first by the Romans, the pagan Romans, that Christianity kept that. And because they sided with the Sassanids, Christians were looking at Jews suspiciously. Caliph Umar negotiated with the Christians to be able to bring Jews back in to Jerusalem. And 77 families were settled at his time, which we know from documents in the Cairo Geniza. And when Muslims built the Dome of the Rock, Jews were also happy again because it was a beautiful place now. It was a place of worship, a place to worship Abraham. That's why in this very interesting document, The Secrets of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a 17th century document, that rabbi himself was from much earlier, but in this Jewish document, Islam is praised as a sign of a messianic age, liberating Jews from slavery and bringing them into Jerusalem. And Jerusalem became a multi-faith city, which continued all the way until the dark century, 20th century. There was another dark century in between. The Crusaders, when they came and occupied, invaded Jerusalem. They killed Jews, they killed Muslims, they killed a lot of Eastern Christians too. They probably didn't distinguish, and they saw them as heretics anyway. But luckily, finally, when the Christians were pushed out by Islamic commander Salah ad-Din, Jerusalem became pluralist again. Jews could come back to the city again. One thing, this Islamic tolerance was, as I said, was not egalitarian. So the dhimmi state is much criticized in the modern world today. Oh, they were, yes, from a modern point of view, Muslims are superior, Christians and Jews were paying extra taxes. There were some legal limitations. However, it's important that the Ottoman Empire, the seat of the Islamic Caliphate in the 19th century, actually abolished this status and accepted equal citizenship. That happened in the Tanzimat or reform period, and it culminated in the Ottoman Constitution of 1876, which declared all Ottomans are equal regardless of religion or race. So Jews and Christians became equal citizens of the empire. And in the Ottoman parliament that can meet next year under the caliphate, 1/3 of the Ottoman parliament in Istanbul was Jewish and Christian. This was the scene, and that's why Alan Doty, in his book Arabs and Jews in Ottoman Palestine, says in the 19th century, none of the observers foresaw the conflict that was yet to come. People couldn't think of something like this back then, that that's horrific, that there will be wars and murders and expulsions and horrific violence of all kinds. But the conflict did come, and why it came is, I think, important to note. I think it didn't come because of mere religion, because these religions were there already. It came because of a new force that actually swept through the whole Ottoman territories and created incredible bloodshed. The name of that force is nationalism. It is the idea that a group of people owns a land and it is their country, it's their nation state, right? It came first in the Balkans. The famous slogan in the Balkans in the 19th century is Serbia is for the Serbs, Greece is for the Greeks, with all respect to Greeks. I mean, they deserve, of course, homeland, but Bulgaria is for the Bulgarians. Now, this sounds very nice until you realize you're in the borders of Serbia and you're not Serbian, right? Then you are a problem. You don't fit into the majority. What do? They expel you. If you're going by yourself, they kill you thinking that you will go. So that's why horrific violence, ethnic violence swept through the Balkans. Seeing this, Turks became also super nationalist, excessively nationalist. Their nationalism, fierce nationalism, had a toll on Armenians, which were horrifically expelled with violence, massacres, and mass killings in 1915. A tragedy that I think my people, the Turks, have not yet fully, honestly faced. And then Turkey and Greece said, we have too many Greeks here, you have too many Turks there, what are we going to do? Let's expel them. So 1 million people were uprooted one night and sent there, and they were like, this idea to make these nations fit their peoples just created more and more violence and mass displacement and so on and so forth. And then it came to the Middle East, right? And I think what we're seeing in Israel-Palestine is yet another tragic, horrific face of nationalist conflict. Two people saying, this is my land, right? And each one of them says, you have nothing to do with this. Your claim to it is totally false or it's bogus, and it will be all ours, right? I mean, so the maximalism on both sides wants to claim it. Now, I see this as another conflict between the peoples of the empire, right? I mean, some, of course, Zionists came from Europe and Russia, so there's a foreign element, like a migration element here. That's why people connected to colonialism as well. But let's not forget half of maybe Israel's society as Mizrahi Jews, peoples of that region as well. Now, if a nationalist conflict happens, there is no way to get rid of one side's passion to have his homeland. I mean, that's what we observed. The best thing you can do is to reconcile them with some political formulas. This happened in the Balkans in 1990s, where Bosnians, my wife's people, were the target of a genocide committed by Serbian ultranationalists. Alija Izetbegović, with his great wisdom, accepted the Dayton Agreement, which was not ideal what the Bosnians deserved, but it still ended the war. If you today go to Bosnia, in Sarajevo, there's Republika Srpska there, those guys did this to you, so they're not maybe your best friends, but everybody's happy that the killing has stopped and everybody got something, right? So that's a kind of a confederational formula. Another example is Cyprus. There was ethnic conflict in Cyprus again between Turks and Greece, and there is a two-state solution in Cyprus since 1974. Not ideal, but at least it stopped the killing, and you can still go to Cyprus and enjoy 5-star hotels on the Turkish side or the other ones on the Greek side. And which means the conflict in the Holy Land today, called the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, will only end when those two people who say this land is ours, with understandable arguments and passions, and one is deep-rooted in history and theology, the other is lived reality of the Palestinians themselves, they may find a way to live together. And we will help this. I'm not Israeli, I'm not Palestinian, so I'm not going to say this should be the solution. Who am I? But I think as third parties, including politicians in the city, right, a few blocks down there, they will be helping this problem only if they honor both peoples. If they say only one people legitimate and we will help them get rid of the other one, that will be one of the most evil things that happen in this part of the world. Just mass destruction and displacement of a people. So the claim and the passions and the deep rooted sense of identity of both sides have to be acknowledged, and we should then start to think, how can 7 million Arabs and 7 million Jews, 7 million Palestinians, some of who are Christian, most of them are Muslims, can live at peace? Because as Peter said, they're all human beings that deserve equal freedom and equal rights. That's my book ends with a slogan. You might have heard the slogan, from the river to the sea. It goes on like that. My slogan, my version of that slogan is that from the river to the sea, both people should be free and every child should be safe. How do we get there? I still don't have a magic formula, but I think that is the only goal that is legitimate in this terrible scene. Thank you so much.